The set pieces video reminded me of something else I wanted to think about, and I put a little bit of thought into it, and that is something I call boss monsters. And it ties into the encounters version of the set pieces. In the sandbox game, I remember seeing a mention of an owl bear in a certain part of the forest. And so the PCs at low levels knew not to go to that part of the forest unless they were ready to mess with an owl bear. This is an owl bear. For D&D players, this is cool. For a lot of other people, they're like, why? What's the point of this? But this is a monster that was created by the people who made up Dungeons and Dragons. They created this monster wholesale as a sort of just a monster to have, something cool. A lot of early D&D monsters were basically taking two different animals and then smashing them together, with always the explanation that at some point in the past, some insane wizard running experiments in his tower in the middle of the wilderness decided to combine animals for no other purpose than to do so. But the owl bear has stuck. This was actually, I got this on DeviantArt. It's a really nice picture. It really makes the owl bear look big and strong and menacing. But that's basically all they are. They're just animals that are very aggressive, and against low-level adventurers at least, they're very strong, very powerful, and very deadly. But once you gain a few levels, they're really easy to beat up. But that idea, there was that part of the forest where they knew not to go. They found signs of the owl bear, like probably claw marks on trees or, owl bear droppings, whatever it was. And so they knew, hey, let's not go to this part of the forest until we're ready to fight an owl bear. Which made sense. It was cool. It was a little bit of a challenge area, and the PCs were able to figure out that there was that challenge there and decide whether or not they felt up to fighting that challenge. And so I was thinking, and in with the encounters version of set pieces, boss monsters would just be special, they would be challenges that were laid out in advance. You know that if you travel too far south in the swamp, you might encounter a night hag or a hag of some sort. I actually have never used a hag in an adventure before, and I didn't realize night hags are higher level. I think they're like CR9. And so they're pretty powerful. The regular hags are like CR4, 5, and 6. I always thought that they were higher level challenges than that, but there you have it. Especially the CR4 Sea Hag. Just seeing the Sea Hag, you have to roll a Fortitude save DC 13 or take 2d6 points of strength damage. That's insane. I mean, you can destroy, fighters and clerics. I mean, they have good fort saves, but one bad save, and suddenly they lose, half of 7 points on average of strength. That's a -3 or -4 to all of your attack rolls and damage right off the bat. Talk about making you useless. In CR4, that means first level adventurers could fight them. Regardless, I wanted to have a hag in the swamp. One of the good things about hags, and like night hags like this, they're humanoid. They have clothes, kind of. Um, you would have a house. I mean, she would have, thatched house or a mud hut or something in the swamp. And so you can have all the trappings of a civilized enemy, even though the actual enemy is a complete uncivil, well, a total monster that you can just fight and kill. So I wanted to have a night hag in the swamp, and as a boss monster, this night hag would be probably, you could have just a normal night hag, or you could like an anise hag or a green hag. Both of those live in swamps too. You could just take one of those, give them a few class levels to make them more powerful, and then give them a name or a reputation or something that players can figure out that, hey, there's a super badass hag that lives in the south end of the swamp. Maybe we want to avoid that area. So it doesn't just have to be the base monster. You can modify monsters, especially for these boss monster type encounters. And these are sort of, Oh, they're not. You can put them on the Wandering Monster table. If PCs decide they want to press on towards that boss monster's area, or even, hang around the areas bordering it, there's a chance they encounter the boss monster. And you can make little dungeons for that boss monster. But for example, like the Hag, I expect the PCs when they want to go face the Hag, they just press on through the swamp. They don't have to go through caves or caverns or any other type of dungeon like that. They just wander around till they find her mud hut and then decide to go and fight her. That's something that could happen. Same thing with like the owl bear that's in the forest. You don't have to go through a dungeon of sorts to find to encounter the owl bear at the end of the dungeon guarding the chest of treasure. You go in and you hunt down that owl bear, and I mean, especially if you give them some sort of distinctive mark, like this owl bear has a peculiar color of feather. The PCs, when they kill this owl bear, can then take some of those feathers, bring them back to the safe town, show up in the tavern. Hey, look, we killed the owl bear, and this is our proof. Or, cut off the entire thing's head, or steal a claw or something. You wouldn't be able to drag probably the entire carcass back to town. And now you're suddenly, you are the badass who went out, killed the owl bear, and came back with its head, in a wagon. And so everybody has to stand up, take notice of you, and that's respect even amongst players, which is why I think boss monsters are kind of cool. For an even higher level badass, one thing that I've always wanted to use is called a Remoraz. And this is a picture, I'm not sure where this is from. This is also from DeviantArt, so some deviant made this, which is pretty nice looking. Remoras are like these giant long bug things. Here's another picture of one. You can see it's got all these legs. This one's got a predator mouth for some reason. They live in ice areas. They're very resistant to the cold. And down their entire back, and this is another monster, unless it came from mythology and I'm completely unaware, was made up by the original D&D creators. Down its back, it has these glands that superheat it, and that allows it to tunnel through ice and live in comfort in the frozen wastelands of the Arctic and Antarctic, or up on top of freezing cold Mount Everest or what have you. And I believe in the original first edition D&D, if you hit a Remoraz on the back, there was a chance that your weapon melted if it wasn't like sufficiently magical. If you hit it just like with a normal sword, its back was so hot the sword melted, which is pretty cool. So I've always wanted to use a Remoraz. This one has a little bit more muted coloring. This one's a little bit more neon down the back. And not really a boss monster, but just a monster that I've always wanted is, not that one, a Carrion Crawler. This is the second edition illustration for it, which captures the alien buggish appearance of the original. And this thing creeps me out. Keep in mind that this is not a little bug. This thing is like 6 to 8 to 10 feet long. This is a huge, nasty critter. And this is what 3rd edition did to it. If there's anything I hate about 3rd edition, it is turning this creepy alien bug-looking thing into this goofy piece of crap that I hate so much. Ugh. But the reason why this guy is here is because another boss monster I thought up was I had found an old notebook of mine that I did not know I brought up to Erie with me. And in it was a paragraph describing the Carrion Lord, which is basically like a human carrion crawler hybrid. So imagine putting this thing's head on like a big, beefy Arnold Schwarzenegger style, body. Actually, I shouldn't say big, beefy Arnold Schwarzenegger style. I imagine these things as being very big and bulky. Kind of like comic book huge. G.I. Joe Extreme style body. But it's got that big alien head and almost like a Cthulhu-esque head, that with a bunch of tentacles dripping down, big bug eyes, and then it would also have these tentacles growing out of its forearm, and its fingers would be really elongated and icky and ugh. But the deal was it was humanoid rather than being this big long bug because someone had owl-beared a carrion crawler and like a human being or Actually, I should more like a gorilla, I suppose, because I can definitely see this thing like traipsing about on all four coming at you. Carrion crawlers can crawl on the wall, so I'm imagining this guy can just scale up the walls and track you down. And he'd be pretty mindless and unable to communicate, but definitely uh, violent and antisocial. But I mean, carrion crawlers by themselves are cool. I've used carrion crawlers a lot, but the carrion lord, now that that idea has come back to me, has inspired some more ideas. He would probably be, he'd have to be somewhere near the Goblin Pits of Io Rock in order to mutate that way, or just find, create a place for him somewhere else, like in the ruins of Trocare or something, where he's carved out his little underground empire, feasting on anything that decides to wander about the hallways that rightfully belong to him. So yeah, that's the boss monsters. There need to be these areas of control on the map where these monsters roam, and PCs need to be wary.